Secret guardians, starry bright, fiery ones beyond our sight, saints of yore, Buddhas too, guiding lights to me and you.
Chapter 19. County Sligo, Republic of Ireland. Shannon Farm near Collooney Town. Akashic Record, June 1999. Mika, wait for me! Calling after her friend, the blonde pixie girl passed through the front gate of the tidy Shannon Farm, where Indian guru Sathya Raju's spring festival of celebration was already in full swing. Her head on a swivel, 19-year-old Kirsten Lindstrom was finally going to see behind the curtain into a forbidden world, a place her father had warned her never to look. Sten Lindstrom's bane and his blessing was his headstrong daughter. His puritanical beliefs and domineering ways had grated on her since her early teen years. Raised on the Lindstroms' remote, Swedish upland farm, Kirsten longed to run away and immerse herself in the wonders of European city life. A gifted student, she was offered a portfolio of scholarships to study at the renowned Queen's University in Belfast. With limited resources of his own to apply to her schooling, Kirsten's father had reluctantly agreed to allow her to study abroad. The girl had chafed under her parents' old-line Protestant moral code and strict work ethic. Each day before school, Kirsten rose in the dark to tend to the family's dairy herd. In the summer it was more of the same, only full-time. Her reward for a long week of herding, milking and mucking out barns was a fire and brimstone church sermon every Sunday. But at last, Kirsten had escaped the forbidding Norse woodlands for Ireland. She had heard of the Raju gathering from an excited co-worker at the Miku Nutrition Institute on University Road. Dutch native and fellow student Mika de Vries had shepherded Kirsten through the Institute's vegan cooking course. Kirsten had no siblings, so her budding sisterly friendship with Mika was most welcome. The pair stood side by side prepping vegetables for a new evening class. Tall and willowy, with ginger hair halfway down her back, Mika stood in striking contrast to the fairy-like Swedish girl. Sri Raju is an enlightened one, Kirsten, Mika had said, as she expertly diced yellow onions. He's performed many miracles. I'd love it if you came. I know people we can ride with. Kirsten had seen posters of the event splashed on university kiosks. They featured Raju in his trademark crimson robes and mala beads. The posters had beckoned one and all to the Raju gathering to be held on a farm in the Irish countryside west of Belfast. She wanted to go, but she'd also heard that the guru's growing movement was gaining a reputation for all-night dance rituals in which hundreds of devotees whipped themselves into ecstatic states. I don't know, Kirsten said. I really want to find my own spiritual way. I want a path that's my own, not just something I inherited or from some guru. You understand? Mika stepped back from the butcher block prep table and studied her friend. I understand completely, she replied. Listen, it won't hurt to find out what Sri Raju teaches. Just think, how often do you get to meet a real Indian holy man? Kirsten had finished her prep work and was staring dreamily out the glass second-floor balcony in the neon street below. It might be good just to see. I'll go, Kirsten declared suddenly, but only if you stay close by me the entire time. Marvellous, Mika said, beaming like a sunflower in July. I'll tell the Rajushis we'll be riding with. Rajushis? Yes, Sri Raju's followers, the ones who first told me about him. 3 of them came here last week, asking to put up that poster we have in the window. Arm in arm, Mika and Kirsten strolled through the grounds of the Shannon farm, marvelling at the menagerie of people, especially the crimson-robed followers of the guru, their faces often as not lit with glee. The afternoon weather had cooperated, partly sunny and warmer than usual for a late spring day in Western Ireland. Inside the gated entrance, robed Rajushis directed traffic while offering the traditional Hindu greeting, bowing to all who entered. "Namaste," said one to Kirsten, his eyes lingering over her. "We enfold you in Sri Raju's love." Kirsten held onto Micah's arm a bit tighter. New seekers were directed past a herd of oblivious sheep grazing behind a pasture fence to a registration tent, where they sat through an orientation that included a schedule and locations of events, but shed little light on the guru and his teachings. Exiting the orientation area, the pair set off downhill on a rutted tractor path toward the main festival area in the distance, which was dominated by a circus-sized tent in a trampled grassy meadow. To the left, a smaller tent flanked the main tent, while a third could be seen in the far distance. Outside the main tent, a sea of crimson-robed bodies mingled like so many red ants. Out-of-uniform newbies like Kirsten and Mika seemed to be in the minority. In groups of 2 and 3, Rajushis were engaging the new visitors in animated conversations. Expressive gestures and warm smiles prevailed. "Hola, sisters!" An out-of-breath voice sounded from behind. Mika turned to see its owner, a boy with dirty blonde hair falling into his eyes in a patchy attempt at a beard. A tiny frown crossed Mika's face. Kirsten noticed. "Hey, what are you doing here?" the Dutch girl replied without enthusiasm. "Hey, back to you. I came for the rave tonight. You?" the boy replied, falling in next to the pair who continued walking. Mika and Kirsten exchanged questioning glances. "Rave? You sure you're at the right farm?" "Sure as we're standing here. Actually, we're walking, but hey, details," the boy replied with an impish grin. "You'll see." "Who's your friend?" Mika hesitated, as if deciding how little she could get away with revealing about her Swedish friend. Though Kirsten and the boy were both Swedes, that was about the only similarity between the two. "She's a Queen student like us," she said finally. "Kirsten, this is Anders. He's from Malmo." Kirsten offered a guarded smile. "Hey," Anders replied half-heartedly. "So what's this rave thing?" Mika pressed, thrown off by Anders' comment. "I thought this was a spiritual gathering." Keeping an eye on the steady stream of passers-by as if looking for someone, Anders didn't answer immediately. You can't really describe it. You have to experience it, and only then you'll know. It's a dervish dance, kind of, where you let everything go. I mean, everything. Hang-ups, beliefs. The Rashis say it's to heal and be reborn. It's wild. You'll see." A dervish dance? Mika wondered on that, and the "you'll see" comment. The second time Anders had dangled that word card in front of them. Ignoring the small voice of warning in the back of her mind, she let her imagination go. What would something like that be like? "You've been to one of these?" Kirsten interjected, her uneasy silence trumped by a need to find out more about what she was getting into. She speaks. "Be nice, Anders. This is a love fest, or haven't you heard?" "Yeah, sorry. Gotta go," he said, waving to a Rajushi who had signalled him over to a mix of festival goers mingling around a picnic table. "I have heard," Anders hollered over his shoulder as he left. "Seen too. You'll see." "Peace be with you," Mika called after Anders. Hurrying off, Anders didn't seem to hear. Kirsten eyed her friend, wondering. "Not sure about this," she said, seemingly to herself. But Mika heard. "Anders is just a party boy. I don't know why he's here, and I don't think he does either." "Not sure about that, Em. Did you not hear him? He's been to these before, and we haven't, so we have no idea." Mika just shook her head. "We came all this way, so let's just see, can't we? Come on. Imagine we're Dorothy and company on the road to Oz." "Then I must be the cowardly lion." Mika laughed. "You said it, not me. Besides, our ride doesn't leave until late." Kirsten looked away from her friend. Her joke hadn't done anything to loosen the knot in the pit of her stomach. She felt like a fawn in a wood with night falling, and her friend wasn't acting like the mother doe she promised to be. "Midnight. We meet them at the gate." "I don't know if I can last that long, Em." "Don't worry, it's all good," Mika said, grabbing Kirsten's hand. "You'll see." Kirsten dimly registered Mika's theft of Anders' signature phrase. Cresting a slight rise in the tractor path, the girls approached a makeshift checkpoint. 2 folding tables with chairs manned by lined-up pairs of Rajushis, each a mixed couple. The Rajushi greeters were pairing off with the newcomers as guides. Mika perked up. Perhaps they would finally get to ask about the guru and his teachings. She'd seen meditation featured on the festival posters, something she hoped to learn more about, for she knew little about the practice. You were supposed to still your thoughts and empty your mind, she'd heard. To what end, she didn't exactly know. She had tried it once with a friend, but had discovered to her dismay that her thoughts didn't have an off switch. Like some gossipy ant renting space in her head, her busy mind simply would not stop chattering. She was disturbed from her daydream by a couple in crimson that had stepped into their path. "Namaste," the pair offered in rhyme, each bowing slightly. "Namaste," Mika replied, not knowing what else to say. Kirsten nodded politely. "Sri Raju blesses you. I am Amar," said a skinny young man, probably still in his teens, Kirsten guessed, his knee-length Rajushi tunic hanging from him like a tent. "This here is Lalita." Lalita bowed before Mika and Kirsten. "We welcome you," the pudgy girl said softly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her and her eyes cast downward. "Amar and Lalita," Mika repeated back before introducing herself and Kirsten. Lalita smiled back. "We trust you see the peace we enjoy here, but we also know you must have questions." Kirsten noticed the disconnect between the girl's words and her body language. Mika glanced at her friend, who showed no sign of joining the conversation, so she dived in. "Your names? They're not Irish." Amar nodded. "But we are Irish, you mean?" "Exactly." "I'm from Derry, no denying that. But Amar is who I am now. We have to let go of the old before we can be born anew and build a better world." To Kirsten, Amar's lines sounded wooden, rehearsed. But what did she know? This whole day had been spent strangely. First the forever-long car ride from Belfast with a trio of odd, mostly silent ducks in robes and beads, and now a kid from Derry named Amar. What about your family? She wondered aloud. They're here, Amar declared, sweeping his outstretched arms over the festival crowd. Sri Raju is my father now. Alarm crossed Kirsten's face. She thought of her own parents and how they would react if they knew how far into the forbidden woods their only daughter had wandered on this fine spring day. She pushed the thought away. Focused on the Rajushis, Mika didn't notice. Where are you from, Lalita? She inquired. Dublin, replied the girl, shielding her eyes from the late afternoon sun. What was your old name? It's not important, the girl replied. Mika waited for more, but realizing Lalita wasn't going to explain, she tried another tack. We saw on the festival posters that you teach meditation. Lalita brightened. Yes, we do. We dance madly. That is our meditation. Raju teaches it is to enter the silence within, Amar added. Mika's eyes puzzled. Kirsten looked totally lost. Amar noticed. One cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. When we dance with joy, when we love without guilt or shame, these are doorways into meditation. Mika's thoughts were reeling, but she couldn't deny the tingle of excitement she felt. Kirsten had begun to tune out the Rajushi couple, her eyes wandering off in the distance. But we also sit in silence to contact the silence, Lalita declared. It is the more traditional form of meditation. The comments caught Kirsten's attention. Mika glanced at her friend, then back at the Rajushis. Can we maybe try that first? She asked. It is open, so yes. Sessions are held in the tent back there by the trees. Lalita pointed to a smaller off-white tent off in the distance. The one over there, see? Kirsten located the tent. She noticed a pair of Rajushi men posted at its entrance, same as in front of the nearer tents. They reminded her of dance club bouncers. No Amar body types among them. Is it just sitting meditation? She asked. Yes, it is. We set it off from the main area for quiet. There are meditation pods you sit in to assist one to enter the great silence. It is a place of pure stillness. Amar's words seemed to charm Mika. Can we walk you over there? Lalita offered. Mika glanced once more at her friend. Kirsten nodded her assent. Sure, let's go, the Dutch girl said. Darkness had descended on the Shannon farm by the time Mika and Kirsten had finished their meditation session, which Mika had enjoyed. Kirsten had found the time sitting alone tolerable, but uninspiring. The hungry pair had found a table in the food-serving area and were devouring their purchased meals. Vegetarian pita wraps, washed down with bottled water, when a buzz of voices rolled through the area, seeming to have originated from the main festival tent in the distance, which was now pulsing with Indian ragas amped through a loudspeaker system. Raju is here! One rapturous Rajushi food server exclaimed. The news spread like wildfire. The guru had arrived with his retinue and had set up court in a corner of the main tent. The ragas seemed to grow in intensity. Mika's heart surged with excitement. Eyeing her friend, Kirsten felt a darker kind of thrill. She was afraid. We need to go in, Mika almost shouted. Please, we need to go now. Kirsten didn't know what to do. She needed a minute. 5 would be better. Chewing on a mouthful of wrap, she held up one hand, asking for time to finish. Walking out of the meditation, it had become clear as day that she had zero desire to go one step further in this crazy adventure. She'd seen enough. She just wanted to leave, to go back to Belfast and her normal life, no matter how ordinary it was. Her student rental apartment, her classes, her work at Miku. No way was she ready for wild and free, as the boy Anders had called it, even if it was a spiritual celebration. But she was beginning to doubt. She heard movement and looked up. Mika had risen from her plastic chair and started toward the main tent. "Kirsten, we need to go now!" she cried over her shoulder. Kirsten jumped up and jogged to catch up. "Mika, please," she begged, grabbing the Dutch girl by the shoulder, pausing her in stride. Mika turned to Kirsten with an exasperated look. "Relax, will you? Come on, enjoy the journey." As Mika began to step out again, Kirsten's breath caught in her throat. She fought to keep up in the surge of people flowing toward the tent. She took in the thick security force of Rajushi men in the area and at the tent's entrance. As Mika approached the entrance, she could not contain her excitement. "This way!" she barked as she cut in front of a couple waiting to enter and darted inside. The ushers at the entrance just grinned. "Mika, don't!" Kirsten shouted. But it was too late. If her friend heard her cry, it didn't register. By the time Kirsten had managed to squeeze inside the tent, Mika had already pushed through the outer ring of revelers, determined to get close to the enlightened one. Kirsten had no choice but to try to follow. Inside the great tent, a sea of bodies swayed to and fro. Some flailed about wildly, lost in abandon. Kirsten sensed an almost manic energy to the crowd. The pulsating ragas drove the dancers. The air was filled with smells of human sweat and pungent incense. Something within Kirsten turned. She remembered her father's sermons on the myriad dangers she would encounter far from Sweden. Hadn't she dismissed his fears as old-fashioned? Where was Mika? Others in the crowd were pushing toward the center of the tent. Maybe that's where the guru was, and Mika. Alone among a sea of reveling strangers, Kirsten trembled. She had to find Mika. She began squeezing her way through the thick crowd, bodies packed more closely together now. She noticed more and more men with their shirts off the closer she got to the center. As she worked her way through the crowd, she felt a lazy hand linger for a second across her breast. A second body pressed up against her from behind. She opened her mouth to cry out, but she could only force out a raspy whisper. "Mika, help!" Terror had seized her voice. Absolute panic would be next. She had to keep herself together. Her only hope was Mika. She had to find her. She fought forward. Up ahead, a ring of crimson robes concealed from the crowd whatever was happening in the inner circle. Kirsten prayed Mika was in there. As she inched closer to the ring of Rajushi guards, one looked back and met the petite girl's stricken eyes. He turned away and looked into the circle, then back at Kirsten. "Make way," he said. "Make way for the Virgin." Disoriented, Kirsten did not immediately register the command, but others around her did, and looked her way. The robed one motioned her forward. A sliver of a path through the swaying mass of bodies opened before her. She took it and broke through the ring of guards into a lighted circle, her eyes darting about, searching for Mika. She didn't hear the guard's whispered blessing as she passed him. "We enfold you in Sri Raju's love," he said softly. Like a Christian entering a sun-drenched Roman Colosseum from the lightless catacombs below, the blinded Kirsten couldn't focus at first. She blinked to clear her vision. She saw bodies, dancers flailing about as if possessed. On the far side of the circle, clapping and laughing like a drunken child, sat the white-robed guru, Sathya Raju, flanked by a harem of female Rajushis. The balding guard who had beckoned Kirsten into the circle was staring intently at Raju. The guru nodded toward him. The Rajushi moved towards Kirsten. She saw the interchange and her heart went into overdrive. Now, in full-blown panic, she looked for any way out, a hole in the crowd she could rabbit into, anything. But the crimson-robed guards had closed ranks. She tried to scream, "Mika! Mika!" No one heard her. Kirsten collapsed in a heap on the dirt floor. She crossed her arms, holding on tight to her childlike soul. After a frenetic search, Mika found her friend on a tractor path behind the great tent. She was curled up in a ball on the hoof-beaten hardpan, filthy and shivering uncontrollably. Somehow Mika managed to get Kirsten to stand. She then painstakingly walked the traumatized girl to the front gate, where, after some desperate begging, she was able to hitch a ride for both of them back to Belfast. The girls squeezed into the cluttered back seat of a rusting VW Beetle. A girl with spiky blonde hair drove, while a scraggly kid slept in the passenger seat. Faint whiffs of exhaust fumes filtered through a hole in the floorboards. Mika cracked her window. Kirsten had withdrawn into a catatonic-like stupor. Mika tried to comfort her, but she just pulled away with a wild, unfocused look in her eyes. The voice that had abandoned Kirsten in the tent spoke not a word during the 3-hour ride back to Belfast.